Even in job announcements, you can be very clear about your values and the character traits that are most important to you from the moment that you put a job posting out there.
Character is important. Now, if you disagree with that statement, please go listen to another podcast because this one is just not for you. I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett, coaching you to grow people and profits with a work positive culture. Yes, character is important. You know it, I know it, everybody we choose to work with knows it. But how? How do you as a leader build a culture that's values aligned and others centered where both people and performance thrive? A character-based culture. My guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast is a sustainable leadership expert, organizational psychologist, and best-selling author of Character Leadership: How to Attract, Retain, and Energize Employees to Create a Winning Organization. She's helped leaders for over 30 years fuel their energy, clarify their purpose, and multiply their impact. So, Work Positive Nation, let's lean in, let's listen up, let's learn how to create a character-focused culture on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. As if we weren't characters enough, we're going to develop some great character leadership today because Allison C. Jones is in the house, Work Positive Nation. Welcome, Allison. I am absolutely ecstatic to have you on the Work Positive Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am maybe even more ecstatic to be here.
Okay, now we're going to go, what up, Michelle, right?
Level up.
Man, I love it. This whole notion of character leadership, in my humble opinion, is so needed today because the huge disconnect that post-pandemic that seems to be driving so much loneliness is that people are isolating themselves from persons who say they're going to do something and don't do it, or broken promises, however you want to typify those in an organizational psychologist language. Tell us, because every superhero has their origin story, tell us, Allison, how you got interested in character leadership and what it means to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that it's honestly a journey that I've been on for many, many years. First of all, I would say I was really blessed to have parents who I think were really strong leaders.
Hmm.
And so through my early childhood experiences, just really observing character-based parenting and leadership became so it was just so powerful to me to see their example. Then I went to college, had a wonderful experience at James Madison University, my alma mater,
Go
and
do.
really, yeah, go Dukes, love it, and saw strong leadership there. Ended up coming back from an internship and decided to go on to graduate school. And the reason that I went into organizational psychology is because I had friends who had left college and gone straight into the workplace. And many of them, to be perfectly honest, were miserable
Oh,
because they were working for people who didn't understand leadership, who were micromanaging, not coming from a place of empowerment. It was really just getting results, getting the job done. And I thought there just has to be a better way. So that's what prompted me to study industrial organizational psychology. And I actually did my master's thesis on, I guess, what you could call the soft skills of leadership
uh-huh.
and how you really show up as a leader. So I think it really all gelled for me back then. And then over the years, in just different experiences in life, you really see that difference between a character-driven leader and someone who is more in it for themselves or
Mm.
for the short-term results
Hmm.
as opposed to the greater good and the long-term sustainable results. So that all kind of came about. And then 2.5 years ago, I said, it's time. It's time for me to start my own business, write a book, and devote my everything I do to this concept. And here we are today.
I love it. I love it. By the way, Work Positive Nation, you'll see in the show notes, character leadership, how to attract, retain, and energize employees to create a winning organization. You'll see that link over to Amazon. So when you're over there buying your coffee or a new pair of socks, just drop in and get yourself a book. So you said a couple things there around soft skills. You reminded me of Larry Levine, one of my early guests on this podcast several seasons back, has this phrase that I absolutely love, and that is soft skills yield hard dollars.
Mm,
And
so true.
that speaks to the dilemma, maybe sometimes trilemma that companies find themselves in with the type of leadership your friends were experiencing. And then also Lindsay Dow, one of my early guests, said, "Dr. J, let's not talk about soft skills. Let's call them power skills." So
Mhm.
character is one of those perhaps previously undervalued skill sets. Tell us what character leadership looks like in the workplace as we attract, retain, and energize our employees to create a winning organization.
Yeah, and I will say too that that phrase soft skills, which was a phrase we used back in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
It's not used anymore because it is so much more than that. It's
Hmm.
the essence of leadership. And to your point, it is all about ROI. And I don't know that all leaders have that understanding that it's not just a nice to have, but this is a strategic imperative that, and it's what
Yeah.
people crave. People
Yeah.
crave someone who is leading authentically from the inside out, which is really ultimately what character leadership is all about. It's
Mm.
about developing your root structure. Who are you at your core? What are your character traits?
Mm.
And then leading from the inside out, where it's really who you are and how you show up as opposed to the things you do. Now, the things you do will be influenced by who you are.
Hmm.
But I liken it to if you have an orange tree, it is an orange tree at its roots. It is not going to produce the fruit of apples. So you can try to staple apples onto that tree and call it an apple tree, but they're going to rot and fall off if it's not coming from the roots. And it's the same thing often with leadership. We
Wow.
try to learn new behaviors, communicate more effectively, learn better conflict resolution skills, all of these types of things, active listening. But if it's not coming from the root structure, they're going to be short lived, they're going to rot, and they're going to fall off. In order to communicate better, listen more attentively, how about if you become somebody who actually is more compassionate, is more grateful? You become that person, and then your behaviors emanate from that root structure.
Mm. Mm.
And that's really what it's all about. Otherwise, it's
Yeah.
just not sustainable.
Yeah, and the behaviors always come out. I mean, we're recording this on July 24th, 2025, regardless of when you're watching it. In our news recently was an example of someone whose root system was diseased. He thought he had it under wraps, but it came out, right? And so now everybody in the world's talking about Coldplay, regardless of what they think about their music. So there's a great example of somebody who may have been leading a company to a successful financial ROI, but who was dead at the root.
Yeah, and it's on display. I mean,
Yeah,
that was
it
a
comes out.
very public, you know. A lot of times we can hide things a little bit better
I
than that.
know. There was no more covert root system for him or her, right? Exactly.
No,
So
no. And if you,
character is
yeah,
going to show up in our behaviors and people will notice. So I love your description there of character leadership because ultimately leadership's an inside job. And
yes.
whoever you are is going to be magnified in your leadership within a company.
Yes.
So growing people and growing profits are synonymous then because we want to grow our people. What are some ways you've seen companies successfully grow their people so that they can grow their profits, Allison?
Yeah, and I think it really starts with, first of all, helping people feel really seen and valued in the organization. It really, a lot of it comes back to appreciation, which is actually one of the things I talk about in my book. I have what I call
Mm.
the five essential states of leadership:
Okay.
awareness, acceptance, abundance, authenticity, and appreciation. But if you don't start with that culture of appreciation,
Mm.
where people feel that they are valued, I call employees are the at the cellular level, they are the cell, the heartbeat of the organization. You have these organs and everything that makes up the organism. Well,
Yeah.
at the very basic most cellular level is the employee. They're the heartbeat. And if they're healthy, then we're going to have healthier teams and systems, and the whole structure is going to be healthier. So I think it really does start with just understanding who they are,
Mm.
what drives them, what inspires them, what energizes them. Not
Mm.
everybody is the same
Mhm.
with respect to that. So treating people like human beings. And I think nowadays we want that more than ever, especially in the world of AI. We're
Yeah.
craving to be seen and valued for who we are and what we bring
Mm.
and the human element. AI is great. but I think it's creating more of a thirst for, well, where can we really differentiate
Yeah.
and where are humans really necessary and their emotions and their thinking? And so when we can value people that way, I
Mm.
think that is really powerful.
My friend Dr. Bob Johansen, who was around in the early 70s helping the DoD invent the ARPANET, which became the internet, talks about that very dynamic where he prefers to call it augmented intelligence, because we're all going to be augmented instead of just an artificial intelligence set over to the side. But it really frees us up for the more mundane work task and gives us an amazing opportunity to redefine work. So the joie de vivre, the human spirit, then is released in work and can take on the kind of character development that you're talking about that really leads to innovation and creativity, which builds a healthy balance sheet, right?
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. And we still get to shape all of it. That's one thing for anyone who has
Yes.
worked extensively with AI. If you just let it go off on its own, you're going to get something. It can be amazing and powerful, but it doesn't have you in it. But
Yeah, exactly.
it's going to sometimes come across as robotic. But when
Yeah.
you shape it and you bring
Uh-huh.
your own authenticity and put your own thumbprint on it, now that's the power. And I like that augmented intelligence.
Oh, absolutely. So let's say I'm building a work positive culture rooted in, to use your phrase, which I love, rooted in character leadership. How do I express that culture? How do I describe that kind of character leadership culture to top talent that I'm seeking to attract to join our teams?
Yeah, well, for one thing, I think that it really does start with creating that culture specifically around character before we're even
Mhm.
going to the recruitment process, because that culture is a living, breathing thing. And it's
Mhm.
amazing, especially with all the tools out there nowadays, LinkedIn being one of them.
Yeah,
People can learn a lot about a culture before they even have their first interview. And they're
100%.
checking with other people. What's
Yep.
it like to work there? A mutual connection works here. Let's
Yep.
talk, right?
Mhm.
And one of the
Mhm.
first things people will say is, oh, it's an amazing culture. We have such strong retention because people love working here. And if they don't say that, that's probably a sign, right?
Those are the people that go to Glassdoor and say, "Don't work here.
Exactly.
It sucks."
Exactly. Unfortunately, that's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hmm.
And right. So I think having all of that culture sort of baked into the organization and the character baked into that, the values, the mission. Now, how are we living that? And I think that from the very beginning, I talk about this in my book, even in job announcements, you can you can be very clear about your values and the character traits that are most important to you from the moment that you put a job posting out there, and
Hmm.
then carrying that through the entire interview process. And how are the recruiters and those who are conducting interviews, how are they living out those character traits and those values? Are they following up with courteous emails? Are
Hmm.
they being responsive? Are they really living out those values? And I think that top talent, they're very perceptive.
Yes,
And
brilliant
we have
even.
to remember that they're coming in and they're picking up on these vibes. And you can state certain things, and that's important, but it's more
Hmm.
how we live it. People know when they've been valued, they know when they've been heard.
Hmm.
They just do. And top talent needs to feel that their unique being who they are is being sought after, that they're not just a check the box applicant, but
Right.
that what they uniquely bring, they demand that. Not everybody is that way. Top talent is that way. They
Oh.
want to have a certain amount of autonomy. They want to be able to be innovative in most cases.
Hmm.
This is what top
Hmm.
talent wants. So how can we then look, what is going to define our ideal candidate? Now let's make sure that our culture matches that
Mm.
really authentically. And if not,
Yeah.
what do we need to change? And then that we communicate that in how we bring them in.
And you put your finger on the pulse of why we in Work Positive Nation talk about top talent attraction instead of top talent recruitment. We're not
Yes.
selling the sizzle, we're selling the steak. And so
Yeah.
if it's through and through, right, then you're going to pick up on it from the job posting to the interaction. I heard from a young man this week who got caught in a layoff cycle due to some various political decisions that were made. It wasn't of his choosing to leave, but nonetheless, the position ended. He's going through that process, right, of searching out a best fit for himself. You know what he commented on? Something you just said. Those courteous thank you emails, thank you for your time, things like that. Now, this guy's absolutely brilliant, top of his field. Didn't come from a company he'd had two or three interviews with. So he's like, man, is this culture what they're representing it to be? So there's got to be some walk to the talk, right, Allison?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's that authenticity piece.
Hmm.
Are we really true to the values that we say are so important to us? And if so, let's live that out.
Hmm.
Let's let's walk the, like you said, let's walk the talk.
Yeah, and how do those traits show up in our interactions with each other? So let's say that we are authentic, that we attract top talent. Once we get them there, you know, we want to avoid dating hard and then getting married and taking our hands off the wheel, right? So,
Mhm.
how do we, from a character leadership standpoint, how do we continue to date, as it were, so that we retain that top talent?
Yeah, and it's such a it's a question with so many different angles to it.
Hmm.
But I think ultimately, I think we have to, and this is why I talk about the five A's, the awareness, the acceptance, the abundance, the authenticity, and the appreciation, because we really have to look at it holistically. How are we aware of so many different things about ourselves as we are showing up as leaders, about our people that we're leading, and about situations and circumstances, same with acceptance and so on.
Mm.
But if we look at people, what are their desires? Most of our top performers, they don't just want to do a job, they want to progress both personally and professionally. So are
Yes.
we tapping into that for them? Are we giving them those opportunities? Are we empowering them and giving them opportunities to do extra, take on extra initiative? Also, are we aligning their aspirations with their work?
Mm.
And, people need to feel connected not only to the mission of the organization, but that the work they're doing is connected to their own aspirations, which might be sometimes a little bit separate from the stated goals of their position. But are
Yeah.
we giving them that opportunity? Are we allowing them to experience autonomy?
Mm.
Most of our top performers don't want to be micromanaged. They want to be trusted, they want to get the work done, and they want to sometimes be able to do it in a way that suits them best.
Mm.
So I think it's really about understanding different people, what motivates them. Not everyone is motivated the same way.
Mm.
That clear, open communication, the trust building at the top, and when you bring people in, are those values really truly being lived out? Because if not, that's going to lead to a break in trust right from the get-go.
Yeah, they're going to
So what are
sniff it
we do?
out.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
important.
It just becomes disingenuous at that point. They disengage, they join that 85% who are disengaged, and
Yeah.
then pretty soon they're out the door and writing a poor review for you on Glassdoor. Dr. Joey here with a question. What if the key to growing your work culture hides in plain sight? Take the free Work Positive Culture Assessment to discover it. Get insights in less than 4 minutes that transform your culture so you grow people and profits. Just answer 13 simple questions and discover your culture stage, your strengths, and get personalized next steps. Receive your free aha culture moment at workpositive.today. Go to workpositive.today right now. Allison C. Jones is my guest in this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. In the show notes, you'll find AllisonCJones.com. So click on that. You'll also see the link over to her Amazon book, as I mentioned a moment ago. Her LinkedIn profile URL is there, as well as her Instagram, Facebook. So there's lots of places for you to do that. So be sure to avail yourself of more Allison C. Jones, right? So let's think about, well, first of all, I want to ask about one of those five A's just because I have some interest in it. The abundance piece. Talk to us about how a work positive culture is rooted in the character as leaders of abundance.
Well, I love that question because abundance is one of my favorite concepts. It's one of my favorite words because it's all about
Yay.
expansiveness and possibility, right?
That's
So
right.
when we think about abundance, that's really it's that spirit of plenty, and possibility, and we can figure things out, and there's a way,
Yeah.
as opposed to scarcity and fear and
Mm,
lack, which are
mhm,
so de-energizing.
mm,
They are fear-based and they induce fear in others. So I
mhm,
think that as leaders, our job is to create a spirit of abundance. It's
mm.
not rose-colored glasses, right? There's still the
Yeah.
reality of limitations that might exist or hurdles that need to be overcome. But there's that spirit of optimism and abundance, and together we can figure this out. It's collaborative.
Mm,
There's always a way to find a resource. Sometimes being stuck is just that we haven't found the resource yet to help solve the problem.
mm,
So I think that spirit of abundance is so contagious,
mhm.
as is a spirit of fear and lack and
Yeah.
scarcity,
Yeah.
which is very limiting. So I just think that it's really important in cultures that we have that spirit. It's energizing. I mean, who wouldn't
Mm,
want to come into a workplace where this is how we feel, that there is the opportunity and abundance always says there's enough to go around. There's
yeah.
enough
Thank you.
success, there's enough wealth, there's enough joy. You don't have to go grabbing for it. You don't have to compete with each other. You can
Mm,
lift each other up. You
mm,
can celebrate each other's successes.
mhm.
And they say like the rising tide raises all ships.
Yep.
That's abundance.
Yeah, it really is. I love it. In order for me to win, you don't have to lose. We can both
Imagine
win
that.
so that there's mutual benefit there and we can all work together. Well, thanks for that
Yes.
because I'm hearing a lot of hope
Yeah.
in that particular A of abundance as part of character leadership. And what I'm experiencing a lot today is hopelessness. There are people who are going to work because they have to, because they've got this huge mortgage, because they're paying $1,200 a month in their car payment. I mean, there's just a lot of
Yeah.
isolationism and desperation and loneliness out there. But I hear hope when we're character-based leaders and we're seeding that abundance into our teams.
Yes, and I think if you stop and think of who some of the most inspirational leaders have been in your life or even
Yeah.
in history, we
Mm,
can all come up with some of the most of probably some similar names,
yeah.
Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., many,
Yeah.
many more.
Hmm.
And these are people who all were about hope and envisioning a better future and positivity, and but again not overlooking or disregarding the challenges that exist,
Hmm.
but saying our spirit is amazing, especially when we bond together. There's a way.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it is really truly that optimism and that hope. And I believe, and you're right. I mean, there's been a lot of layoffs. There's been a
Hmm.
lot, the job market is tough. It's
Oh,
tough right
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And I
Robert
can
White.
understand how people feel that. But but
Yeah.
also we have what we need. We have what we need. How much sometimes we think that we need things that we want, but we don't really need them.
Mm,
And certainly we want to be able to pay our bills and we want to have a good life, and that's
sure.
all wonderful and
Sure.
admirable, and I'm not knocking that. But at the same time, sometimes we can get so bogged down thinking that we need certain things when really we have everything within us and we can get support for what we don't have.
Mm,
And
hmm.
a lot
Hmm.
of it, so much is in our mindset.
Mm. Oh, wow. Big word there. You reminded me, we were talking about Mahatma Gandhi and those folks. Napoleon Hill's mine.
Oh,
I just continue to go back to everything he's ever written. And I've been reading him since I was a teenager, which was beyond yesterday. So,
a few years ago.
okay, maybe 40, 50 years, 50 years. Okay, I'll be honest with you. It's those persons who I just continue to visit. Robin White was one of my recent guests on the Work Positive podcast, and she says that what she's seeing out there is about 300 applications for every opening.
Yeah.
I talked to somebody else recently and they said there was 3,200 applications for a single position. So yeah, there's a lot of great talent out there, but it's the old Henry Ford quote, right? If you think you know,
Yeah.
then you are, right? If you think you're right, think you're wrong, then you are. So I love that abundance is a cornerstone of character-based leadership. What are some of the challenges you're seeing for companies today in terms of designing and living into and out of character-based leaders?
Yeah, I think that you're always going to face resistance. And I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning about maybe not seeing that return on investment,
Mm.
where they think that this is all nice, but we have urgent things to deal with today. We don't have time to be talking about character. I am who I am. You can't change me. There's just a lot of that resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're the problem over here. I'm not the problem, right? And you have to,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and you may be a repeat offender, and your back door to your team is 10 times the size of your front door, right? But it's all these
exactly.
people. You can't find people who want to work today, all right? Uh,
Exactly. And you have
Looking
the
at
revolving
everybody,
door.
it might be you. So, yeah, words well spoken from an IO psychologist, by the way. Thank you. There's an
Yeah.
opportunity for us to grow based on our characters to see what's out there for us. So, redefining how character-based leadership then takes on a financial ROI is a part of our challenge, right? If we're growing people, then how are we going to grow profits? I recently read where companies that have been voted best place to work, and of course, this is an internal survey done of their employees, right? That's how they achieve that level. I recently read that their return on investment, these are S&P 500 companies, but their year over year is like 17%, whereas the average for S&P is somewhere between 8 and 10. So obviously, it demonstrates financially that when you grow people, you grow profits. So there are opportunities to change mindsets around that. What are some other challenges that you're seeing for folks today in terms of having a work positive culture that's character leadership based?
Yeah. And to your point, there's a lot of data, even all of the Gallup studies that come out every year about engagement and the quiet
Mm-hmm.
quitters and the loud quitters and then the studies that tie this to the problems with leadership or the culture. There are studies that show increases in profitability when you actually show up a certain way and you really
Mm-hmm.
genuinely care about your employees. So there is no doubt. Now, a lot of leaders don't understand that. They haven't seen the data, but it is real. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think what is tough to answer your question is a lot of times in organizations, there are initiatives or programs that are rah rah, they sound great at the beginning, we're going to try this, but then they fall by the wayside because
Mm-hmm.
of the urgency of the work or people coming in and out. It's just difficult to sustain programs. And that's why I talk about sustainable leadership and having these programs be really baked into the culture. They're woven
Yes.
into the fabric of the culture. Then it's not
Yes.
just a program, but it's who we are, right? It really has to become your core identity. Just like if you are going to be a certain way in your life, if it's not part of your core identity, it's not going to last.
Not going to stick.
If
Mm-mm.
if you're if you're not a runner, then you can try running all you want, but you're not going to keep running because you don't
Right.
consider yourself a runner. You're just someone trying out running, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the company. If we are not character based or if
Mm.
XYZ values aren't what characterize us, we can put programs together, we can try initiatives, we can get people to lunch and learns. But if it's not truly woven into the fabric of the organization, it's not going to be sustainable. And it does start with leadership.
Mm.
It does start with leadership. Leadership has to be the ones who are, first of all, leading that way by example, but second of
Mhm.
all, making sure that the messages are woven throughout and holding people accountable to that.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Mm.
And when you define character, there's a whole bunch of different character traits, but there are things we can all agree on. We can all agree on core traits that we
Mm.
all aspire to.
Mm.
And the five A's I talk about, there's a lot baked in there. There's a lot with integrity and humility. There's
Mm.
sort of an umbrella that things fall underneath. But we
Uh-huh.
can all agree, for example, on an appreciative culture.
Mhm.
And so let's start there. Let's start by just really being cultures of appreciation. How do we do that day in and day out in a
Mm.
sustainable way?
Mm. I love it. Absolutely love it. Allison C. Jones is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. So, in the show notes, you'll find all these links. So, if you're walking the dog like Allison's little fur baby that's wanted
Loved
to
it.
join her on this episode, and I offered to go get Maggie May, but we decided the dogs would steal the show. Never go on a show with animals,
And I
right?
love that name, Maggie May.
Oh,
Oh, so
thanks. That's my wife. She's a good Southern girl, so we.
that'd be a double-barreled name.
That's right. That's the way it always is. Dr. Joey, right? So when you go to Allison C. Jones, by the way, that's Allison with one L and then a C and Jones.com. What are we going to find, Allison?
On my website?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really excited because my website is newly launched under my name. I have my Wellness Society US.com website, and
Yeah.
now I've launched my new website, and I'm excited because it just talks a little bit about who I am, my services, what do
Nice.
I mean by sustainable leadership.
Yeah.
I have information on there. One of my core services is a women's leadership program called GLOW,
Oh,
which stands
cool.
for Growing the Leadership of Women.
Mm.
So there's information there about that and about some of the workshops and talks that I do, keynotes and things like that. So I would love to interact with anybody, hear from anybody, reach out. I just love to help organizations really dive down deep so that they can really embed some of these concepts into their culture, which just makes life so much better for everybody and it makes the organization much more successful.
Oh, yeah, both financially and from a human
Yeah.
perspective. Character Leadership, the book's on Amazon. There's a link in the show notes for that. Her LinkedIn profile URL is there. She'll answer your messages from LinkedIn. I got to tell you, I love the phrase sustainable leadership. That just really resonates with me because it's more than just a passing fancy. We're not just shiny shiny object syndrome. We are literally, as you said, weaving this into the fabric of who we are. So if we're going to weave sustainable leadership or character leadership into the fabric of our work positive culture, Allison C. Jones, what's one thing? What's your one thing we can do today to create that kind of positive work culture?
I would say I would go back to the whole concept of appreciation, of really practicing. We talk about practicing gratitude, and that's something that I am a firm believer in. I think that it completely changes who you are as a person when you
Mhm.
start to practice gratitude because you
100.
start to notice it changes your mind, the wiring where you notice things throughout the day. So every morning when I wake up, I say three things I'm grateful for. I don't write them down because that's an extra step. I just say them out loud or in my mind. But I think if we start to weave more appreciation, and I use the word appreciation because to me it's a very active word to appreciate and to express appreciation. But if we can just start there, how do we every day show appreciation in the workplace and very specific appreciation? Thank you for doing this. You did it in such a way that here's the impact that it had. If we can do that, that becomes a ripple effect. And if we can encourage our teams to do that with each other and to just celebrate each other's wins and appreciate each other's contributions, I think that's a great place to start.
Oh, I agree. And celebration, the neuroscientists tell us, cements that behavior into our neural network. And so, since the appreciation accompanies it, I want to do it again, over and over and over. How many times can I do it? So, you talk about woven into the fabric of a culture,
It's
appreciate the
rewarded.
people around
Yeah.
you. Yeah. And it just becomes not only organic, but it becomes exponentially growing. I love it. And I love you, Allison C. Jones. Thanks so much for being a guest on this episode of
Oh,
the
my
Work Positive
pleasure.
podcast. Work Positive Nation, go to the show notes, pick yourself up a copy of Character Leadership, and then go to her website and invite her to come speak to your group, especially if you're a woman, because it sounds like Glow is really, excuse the pun, it's a dad joke, hot. I like that. So
It is. It's on fire.
that's right. Allison, thank you for your wisdom and your time today to help Work Positive Nation build cultures, work positive cultures based on character leadership. Thank you so much.
And thank you. Thank you for the work you do and for having me.
I'm grateful you joined our conversation about creating positive work cultures that grow people and profits. Connect with me directly on LinkedIn today. Just search for Dr. Joey Fawcett or click the link that's below in your show notes. When you send your connection request, mention that you're a podcast listener because I want to give you a free digital copy of my Work Positive Team Edition book. That's a $19.95 value. It contains practical strategies that I've personally used with clients to transform toxic work environments into thriving cultures. We explore how to create a positive work culture in every single one of these episodes. Our LinkedIn connection, though, allows you and me to directly talk about your specific challenges. I personally read and respond to your messages because I genuinely care about your success in creating a positive work culture. So go to LinkedIn and let's connect. Remember to mention you're a podcast listener to receive your free Work Positive Team Edition book. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the Work Positive Podcast.